The breakfast rush had just ended, leaving behind the familiar aftermath of crumpled napkins and sticky syrup residue. My name tag read Dexter Shift Manager, a title that felt both like an achievement and a prison sentence. The man in the expensive suit had been sitting in the corner booth for 20 minutes, nursing a black coffee and typing on his phone. Nothing unusual about that. We got all types during the morning shift. But then he stood up to leave, and our eyes met across the restaurant. He stopped mid-step, his face going completely pale like he'd seen a ghost. His coffee cup trembled in his hand as he walked straight toward me, his Italian leather shoes clicking against our worn linoleum floor. "Dexter Vaughn?" His voice came out as barely a whisper, but there was something intense, almost desperate in his tone. He leaned forward, examining my face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "You're the ghost student Harvard's been looking for." Those words hit me like a physical blow. Harvard, a name I hadn't allowed myself to think about for 5 years. A dream that had been ripped away from me so violently that even hearing it spoken aloud made my chest tighten. I set down my cleaning rag slowly, aware that my coworkers were starting to stare. "I'm sorry, sir. I think you have me confused with someone else." The lie came automatically, a defense mechanism I'd perfected over the years. "No," he said firmly, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. "Dexter Vaughn, Riverside High School valedictorian, perfect SAT scores, accepted to Harvard class of 2019 with the inaugural Blackstone Excellence Grant. That's you, isn't it?" The Blackstone Excellence Grant. Hearing those words after all these years was surreal. I remembered the name from the acceptance letter, remembered how my guidance counselor had cried when she told me I'd won it. $85,000 a year. A full ride to the best university in the world. A ticket out of everything. Let me tell you who I am, or rather, who I was supposed to be. My name is Dexter Vaughn, and at 18, I was the kid everyone said would make it out. In a small Ohio town where most kids followed their parents into the steel mills or service jobs, I was the anomaly. The weird kid who actually enjoyed studying, who saw beauty in mathematical equations, and found escape in classic literature. My mother, Patricia, worked part-time at a dental office, spending her days scheduling appointments for people who could afford porcelain veneers and teeth whitening. She'd come home talking about Mrs. Henderson's new smile, or how Dr. Morrison's daughter just got engaged to a pharmaceutical executive. My mother had a strange obsession with beauty and status, always lamenting how life had shortchanged her in both departments. My father, Harold, was quieter about his disappointments. He worked double shifts at the steel mill, his hands permanently stained with industrial grime no amount of soap could remove. He'd eat dinner in silence, occasionally grunting approval at something on the news, then fall asleep in his recliner by 8 o'clock. On good days, he'd pat my shoulder and say, "Keep studying, son. Don't end up like me." Then there was my younger sister, Melody. If I was the brain of the family, Melody was supposed to be the beauty. Supposed to be, because my mother never thought she was quite beautiful enough. There was always something to improve. Her nose was too wide, her lips too thin, her chin too weak. My mother spent hours poring over fashion magazines with Melody, pointing out the faces of models and actresses, lamenting the genetic lottery that had failed their family. The man in the suit was still staring at me, waiting for an answer. Theodore Blackstone, he'd introduced himself. I recognized the name now, remembered it from the scholarship paperwork. He was the billionaire philanthropist who'd established the grant in honor of his late wife, herself a first-generation college student who'd become a renowned scientist. "That was a long time ago," I finally said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I work at McDonald's now." "But you never came," Theodore said, his confusion genuine. "You won the scholarship, you were accepted, everything was arranged, then you just vanished. No response to emails, calls, letters. For 5 years, you've been Harvard's biggest mystery. 5 years. Had it really been that long? 5 years since the night my future was stolen from me, not by strangers or circumstance, but by the very people who were supposed to protect it. 10 years ago, I was Dexter Vaughn, the miracle kid from the wrong side of Riverside, Ohio. Every teacher I'd ever had used the same word to describe me: exceptional. Not just smart, but hungry for knowledge in a way that made them stay after school just to recommend more books, harder problems, bigger challenges. I solved calculus equations the way other kids solved video game puzzles. Finding genuine joy in the moment, everything clicked into place. Our house sat on Maple Street, a modest 2-story with peeling yellow paint and a front porch that sagged slightly to the left. My bedroom was the converted attic, where I'd covered every wall with scholarship applications, college brochures, and a giant map of Boston with Harvard circled in red marker. I'd fall asleep staring at that circle, imagining myself walking through Harvard Yard in the fall, leaves crunching under my feet. Finally, where I belonged. My father, Harold, came home every night at 6:30, sharp, lunch pail in hand, steel dust in his hair. He'd wash up at the kitchen sink, scrubbing his hands raw while my mother Patricia complained about the gray water staining the porcelain. He was a man of few words, but deep pride. When I showed him my report cards, straight A's every semester since middle school, he'd nod slowly and slip a $20 bill into my hand. "For your college fund," he'd say, though we both knew $20 wouldn't even buy a textbook. My mother was different. Patricia Vaughn had grown up pretty enough to believe she deserved more, but not pretty enough to get it. She spent her days at Dr. Brennan's dental office, checking in patients who drove Mercedes and wore designer handbags. She'd come home with stories about Mrs. Wellington's daughter marrying an investment banker, or how the Fitzgerald family just bought a vacation home in Florida. These stories always ended the same way, with her looking around our cramped kitchen and sighing deeply. "If only I'd been born with better cheekbones," she'd say, touching her face. "Or, if your father had ambition beyond that mill, we could have been something." My sister Melody inherited my mother's obsession with appearance. At 16, she spent hours in front of the bathroom mirror, analyzing every angle of her face. She was pretty in a wholesome, girl-next-door way, but my mother had convinced her it wasn't enough. They'd spend weekends driving to makeup counters at department stores we couldn't afford to shop in, testing products and taking selfies under the fluorescent lights. Dexter got the brains, my mother would tell anyone who'd listen at church or the grocery store. But beauty is what opens doors in this world. Poor Melody, she tries so hard. The way she said, "poor Melody," while looking at my sister's perfectly normal face made something twist in my stomach. The way she never said, "poor Dexter," when discussing my acne scars or crooked nose from a childhood bike accident made it clear where I stood in her hierarchy of disappointment. School was my escape. Mrs. Chen, my guidance counselor, had taken me under her wing freshman year. She stayed after school to help me with scholarship applications, drove me to academic competitions in neighboring counties, even paid my SAT registration fees out of her own pocket. "You're going to make it out, Dexter," she'd say. "You're going to show everyone what's possible." I remember the day the Harvard acceptance came. April 5th, a Tuesday, unseasonably warm for Ohio spring. The envelope was thick, heavy with promise. I didn't open it immediately. I walked around the block 3 times, holding it against my chest, before finally sitting on our front porch and carefully breaking the seal. "Dear Mr. Vaughn, we are delighted to inform you that you have been accepted to Harvard University's class of 2019. Furthermore, you have been selected as the inaugural recipient of the Blackstone Excellence Grant, a full scholarship covering tuition, room, board, and expenses for all 4 years. $85,000 per year, $340,000 total, more money than my father would make in a decade at the mill. I ran inside, shouting for my family. My father was in his recliner, my mother was scrolling through her phone, and Melody was painting her nails at the kitchen table.